just kind of looking through some of the things that I know about your journey, you've had several endeavors with pharmaceutical type companies. And my assumption is you had nothing to do with pharmaceutical as an undergraduate or growing up. And so I guess was there anything drug related? Drug related is probably not the best word, but in sort of that genre with the Kimberly Clark job, or how did you transition into this pharmaceutical path?
Yeah. So what happened is I get a job with Kimberly Clark. Kimberly Clark in the United States, what they'll do is I know they still do this now. They're sure they do it out of Tennessee still. They hire, let's say, 25 college seniors each year. And they'll interview in their headquarters in Atlanta or in Wisconsin or Dallas. They'll take these 25 kids that they'll hire throughout the year. And then in like May, you find out where you're actually going to be working. By chance, I got moved to Vermont, right? Never been to New England, never been to Vermont, no idea what Vermont was like. Now, I don't know if I'd ever even met anyone that had been to Vermont, to be honest with you. It was the complete antithesis of Memphis, Tennessee, right? Not too, I mean, it's a little more similar to being in the Smokies, but it's a lot different than being in Memphis. So I took it, right? I was excited. I was excited to move to the Northeast, try something different. What I didn't know is Vermont is one of the most rural places in the country. And I was I got moved to Milltown, right? Because it was a paper company. And I was living in a town of a few hundred people and working in a town of like less than 100 people. I was 22 years old. And so the prospect of continuing that at that age was not appealing to me. And Boston was 2 hours from where I was living. And the Boston economy was blowing up. And I wanted to live in a major metro area. You know, Memphis was nice, Nashville was nice, but I wanted the real big major cities. Mm-hmm. And you know, one of the pulls there was I wanted to live in a town with pro teams, right? Mm-hmm. And there weren't really any pro teams. You know, the most professional team at the time in the state of Tennessee was, you know, our football team in Knoxville. So, you know, Boston was super appealing to me. It was completely different. And by chance, I ended up with a job at a life sciences company. And from there, the life science industry in Boston and globally has only grown. And so what it's done is it's allowed me, because I was 23, I think, when I took the job, to grow with the industry, right? Because it used to be just a handful of large pharmaceutical companies, and now it's evolved to just, you know, a lot of it came out of the intellect out of MIT, which is why it's so strong based in the Boston area. And these companies get started here and they mature and grow from that point. And, you know, I got in the industry by essentially luck. I wanted this job because it was based downtown in mm-hmm. Boston, and I was 23 years old. Mm-hmm. And I was coming from, you know, Tennessee and from a small town. I'd been living in a small town of Vermont, so I wanted big city downtown. Mm-hmm. And but I was just fortunate at that point. It was the right, it was a little bit of luck, right? I picked a company that was a good company, and I picked an industry that only grew. Yeah. And I was in consumer, and consumer only shrank, frankly, after that point. So it's just, you know, it's better to be lucky than good.
Definitely. So let's just segue into life in Boston and kind of who you interact with now. So you're a West Tennessee boy, spent time in Knoxville. You're a lot like many of my students. But nowadays, and for probably the last couple of decades, you're interacting with Ivy Leaguers all the time. So not necessarily like you, at least in terms of a background and this thing we call pedigree and all of that. So what's that like for you?
Yeah. So when I was younger, it was a little insecure about it, right? I don't even have my master's degree. I just have my bachelor's of science from UT Knoxville with a finance major. Like that is the only diploma I've got on my wall. And when I moved up here, I didn't know anyone else that went to an SEC school. And it was mostly predominantly, if it wasn't Ivy League, it was, you know, a lot of just small private liberal arts colleges up in the Northeast. Now, that's not totally the case. I mean, there's plenty of people here that go to state schools. But up here, state schools are looked at in a little different manner. That, you know, if you live in Knoxville, if you live, I mean, basically, if you live in about 45 other states in the United States, the flagship state school is a real source of civic and state pride. Up here in the Northeast, it's a little different. It's just, it's kind of all considered settling in a way, right? Whereas in Knoxville, I knew lots of very smart people that aspired to go to Tennessee, and they could have gone to Vanderbilt or anywhere else, but they wanted to go to Tennessee, and I kind of was in that same bucket. But you know, coming in, not being from the area, not knowing a lot of people, and at the time, by the way, not every Tennessee game. This was before every football game was on every day, right? Or on every game was televised, right? So you couldn't even like rally around. And college sports up here are not a big deal, which was a very hard thing for me. Still is. I still haven't gotten used to that part. Over time, though, you know, you learn to, number one, the more people you meet with these different backgrounds, you know, you kind of see that, right? And then I would look at them and I would say, you know, at one time I was actually dating a girl that went to Boston College that was close to my age. And we had similar jobs, made similar amounts of money. And I would look at her and say, you know, your 1 year at Boston College cost the same as all 4 of my years in Knoxville, right? Which was, when you think about it, an amazing bargain that it was then. I'm not sure how much it is now, but at the time it was incredibly cheap to go there. And then I started realizing the older I got, and the more I would come across, you know, the longer I've been here, the more people I meet, Tennessee alumni as well as other SEC school alumni up here. I realized I've never met a person that went to an SEC school that regrets it. And it became more of it went from something I was insecure about to something I was actually quite vocal and proud about. Because, you know, my degree is every bit as good as what theirs was. The only thing I regret about it is there's just not as many alumni up here. It would be nice if there was just more, you know, people with the same kind of basically college rooting interest in the college football. But that's it. Everything else about it, I think, is kind of a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, then that's a lead into, I guess, maybe the last thing that we can talk about today. So not a lot of our alum are there, but I think there does exist a non-trivial number of students that are watching this right now that actually maybe have some aspirations to get up that direction. And so, do you have anything to say to those folks that are thinking, you know what, I'd like to get to Boston, I'd like to get to New York, I'd like to get to some place in this area?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is, in your mind, it's probably feels almost impossible, right? It just feels a million miles away, and without knowing what to do or how to do it. But it really just takes one job, right? Now, I'm pretty risk adverse, so I would never tell anyone just get in your car, drive up, and start putting out your resume, right? It's not something I would ever do myself. I came up because I had a job. But don't be afraid to pursue a job. I mean, if you've got the wherewithal to just move up, pursue your dream, I'm not telling you not to. Absolutely go do it. Just, I wasn't wired that way. But in this day and age, I mean, look for an opportunity. I mean, it doesn't, and by the way, what I would say is, it doesn't have to be, if you want to try living in a new area and you want to get a job first, don't worry about trying to find the first step of your career there, right? Find a job that you can do, or even that you're not, even if you're unsure about it, take the chance on that and see where it takes you, right? the days of just getting a job at one place and staying there forever are gone. But, you know, I mean, the only barrier is it's an incredibly expensive place to live. But well, New York's really cheap right now, given the real estate market. But, you know, if the job markets are there, it's worth looking into. It's not that, and you'll assimilate yourself a lot quicker than you realize. But there is a little bit of shock of just being, I'm not from here. This is completely new, but it's also very exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, that's encouraging. So Matt, thanks so much for your time today. And we'll just sign off there. And who knows, maybe some of the people on this or watching this will end up talking to you someday.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you.